you find yourself clearing your plate because you hate to waste food? Do you find yourself making a plan but not really following it through? Today, I have the fabulous Lisa Salisbury on the podcast, and she's a former dieter turned health and weight loss coach on a mission to stop women obsessing over everything they eat and feel confident to lose weight without a diet app. She helps women to make their lives amazing so that food doesn't have the job of comforter, compensator, and celebrator. She's also the host of the fabulous podcast, Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. Welcome to The Thriving Metabolism. I'm your host, Louise Digby. I'm a registered nutritional therapist and women's weight loss expert and founder of the Nourish Method to Lasting Fat Loss. Let's dive in. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Lisa and I'm excited to dig into all sorts of things today, a little bit different to what we've spoken about before. So welcome, Lisa. Perhaps you could start us off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your backstory, how you got into nutrition and what it is you do right now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Louise, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a health and weight loss coach, and I got into this mostly because I was a chronic fad dieter, and I thought that I wanted to help other people count macros, and I thought that's what I wanted to do at the beginning. I thought I wanted to, set up nutrition plans and give them food lists. And once I really started coaching people, I realized what they really needed help with was less about what they were eating and more about why they were eating when they weren't hungry, more about the mental aspect of what they were putting on their plates and why they were eating at certain times of the day or overeating at certain meals, that sort of thing. And so that's when I went ahead and got a life coaching certification so that I could work more with the brain. So I had the health and the nutrition background, but then I also was able to learn a CBT model, cognitive behavioral theory, and help them with that as well. But historically speaking, I mean, I started dieting when I was in high school. I had several adult males tell me that I was overweight. My swim coach in college was like, you're okay, but your body fat percentage was too high. We had done these body fat tests as a team, and it was very odd because I was swimming fine, but he was like, well, your body fat's too high. That was the only number he cared about. He gave me some vitamins to help with that. But I was eating in the dorms. What was I going to do? So, I got married, had babies for several years. And so that was just such a roller coaster for my brain because I'm like, I can be fat. I have to be thin. I can be fat. It was very confusing because it was I had this permission to be quote unquote overweight, but I was not. I was pregnant.
Mm.
It's right. But my brain was very confused, especially my first doctor was like, well, you were overweight to begin with. So I only want you to gain 18 pounds. And so, then every subsequent doctor, I'm like, well, how much should I gain? Because we had moved around. So I didn't have the same ones. And I finally had a female doctor just look at me and go, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do what you want. This exact the exact number of pounds to gain was just not, she just wasn't concerned. She
Mm.
was like, that's for you to work out and to work that out with yourself. And if you want to gain a lot of weight and then lose it afterwards, that's up to you. But I did feel a lot of pressure to lose my weight in between my pregnancies. And so after my last one, then the pressure was really real, well,
Mm.
you're never going to get pregnant again. So you better really get this off. So that's when I kind of slipped into a little bit of orthorexia with my macro counting, calorie counting, just got really obsessive, really anxious if I couldn't count. And so I'd either get just really anxious and try and figure it out, or I would just throw my hands up in the air and then think, well, I'll just eat whatever I want. And
Mm.
so it was this roller coaster of being really strict and then just not at all. It wasn't great. Let's just say it wasn't great. So um, that's kind of my personal background of why I came around to coaching the way I do.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've had such personal experience with it. And And also, it's something that I see in so many practitioners and coaches, that you start off with the practical side of things, the macros and the kind of portion control, but you always end up going down into the mindset side of things because it's just so essential. We can't really do the food side of things without the mindset side of things, because it's all well and good knowing what to do, but we've got to be able to do it consistently, and it's got to be able to kind of work in our brains and make sense for us. So one of the things that you talk about is kind of clearing your plate, and how that's something that we've kind of all been taught to do. Like you're told off if you don't clear your plate when you're younger, but it's not necessarily something that really serves us as we get older. So tell me about that, and why you talk about how we need to give that up.
Well, in America, the Clean Plate Club is a very, very common term for kids. Like, oh, you got to be in the Clean Plate Club. And I was really started to be curious, like, why do we collectively use this phrase? And it turns out in World War I, as well as in World War II, it was an actual government program. There were
Oh.
posters for children to be in the Clean Plate Club in their schools. And the idea was, because back then, of course, in cafeterias and schools, it wasn't all prepackaged stuff like we give our kids now. It was, you go down the line and they dish up what you ask for, and then you eat that amount, right? And so being in the Clean Plate Club meant that you asked for the amount that was right for your body, basically, and that you ate all of that, because there were rations and we were sending extra food to starving children in Europe.
Mm.
And so literally my grandparents were in these Clean Plate Clubs, or taught to be so, because there were starving children in Europe. And then in the 80s, when I grew up, my parents said there are starving children in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is that when we were in the wartime, they were literally were sending our surplus food to war-torn countries, whereas in the 80s we had an abundance, and so we weren't, it wasn't about conserving what we were eating, we were able to send. And so it's this perpetuated like family saying, really started by a government program, which is fine. Like, I'm sure it worked well at the time. Like, there's no shame there. What's interesting is just that, why do we say the things that we do just because our parents did?
Yeah.
And so, first of all, just figure out, is there anything you're doing? There's a funny little anecdote about a ham. This granddaughter is having the extended family for dinner for Easter, and she cut the ends off the ham. And her mom goes, "Why did you do that? Why did you cut the ends off the ham?" And she said, "Because you always did. So I thought that's how you fixed ham." And then she turns to her mother, the grandmother, and she goes, "Mom, why did you always do that?" "Because I did it because you did." And she said, "Because it didn't fit in the pan." Right? We got to make sure that we are doing things for real and good reasons, not just because the ham didn't fit in the pan of the size that your grandmother had. And
Mm.
so you have to really examine, like, what kinds of saying. So it's kind of just a metaphor. The Clean Plate Club is also a metaphor for, what are you doing that your parents maybe did, but you don't really want to be, or you don't know why you're doing it. And it's not to throw our parents under the bus. It's not to like blame your childhood for the way that you are, but it's just to be like, hey, do I still want to think like this? Do I still want to think that the right thing to do is to clear your plate every single meal? The reason I think we need to give this up is because doing that is a habit.
Mm.
And so rather than checking in with our bodies and saying, hey, do I really need all of this food? We just finish it up no matter what is on our plates. That's probably fine at home because you're probably the one that dished up your plate. But what we need to get really good at is being able to see food left on our plates at restaurants. And we
Mm.
eat out a lot. And they bring you the same portion regardless of how hungry you are. And if you and your partner, your spouse order the same thing, like, I'm 5'4", my husband is 6'5", and they bring us the same portion. If we both order the salmon and the mashed potatoes, they bring us the same amount.
Mm.
And at home, we never, ever, ever eat the same amount.
Yeah.
my body just doesn't require that much as much fuel as his body does. And so we, as women, generally speaking, we are smaller people, but the portions are sized for a person who is larger than us so that that larger person is satisfied at the restaurant,
Mm.
right? Does that make sense? So we've got to learn to leave some food behind or we will be consistently overeating.
It's so interesting because I talk a lot about how we're kind of living in the man's world in terms of all the research is done on men, and we're not little men, and our hormones are different and all of that. But yeah, I hadn't even thought about it in terms of like just what you get served up in a restaurant. It is a one size fits all, and clearing your plate as a woman is kind of crazy, really. So how do we start to move away from that and like reprogram ourselves to allow ourselves to leave a little bit of food on the plate?
Yeah, it really gets into our mindset about wasting food. I don't think I have had more than one or two clients, literally, over the years say that they have no issue with wasting food because I do like a whole unit on it.
Mm,
And it's been very, very few and far between that we skip it because most people say, I hate wasting food. That is
mm,
the most typical thing. I hate wasting food. It's because they feel like they're wasting money. So there's a couple of things that we can do at home. What I like to do is practice with just leaving one or two bites on your plate. It's it's not enough to be a money issue, really.
mm,
We're talking pennies about, one or two bites of food, but seeing food on your plate really helps the mental state. Like nothing bad is going to happen if I throw one bite away.
mm,
And even if it's what we call at my house a dessert night, when I had younger kids, they always want a dessert. And sometimes I would just say, it's not a dessert night. Like we don't need to have a sugar dessert every single night. So if it is a dessert night, and you have already decided, hey, I'm going to have a slice of the apple pie that I made, going ahead and leaving a couple bites behind on your dinner plate is also really helpful to your mindset because your brain is going to be like, no, no, no. If we don't clean our plate, we can't have dessert because I mean, how many parents have done that, right? I know I did and
mm,
before. And so it really helps to just tell your brain, like, leaving food behind is normal and natural. Nothing has gone wrong. I can eat something else and not eat this. Like it's just a lot of just like seeing it on the plate and letting your brain freak out. This is wrong. And just then talking normally to your brain in a calm tone. Nothing has gone wrong. We're just practicing leaving some bites behind.
mm,
We don't need to clean our plate every single time. So practicing that at home will help you when you're then out. And then when you're out, there's a couple of strategies you can do there. Obviously, like bring a to-go box home
mm,
is always a good idea. And I know some people are like, I don't like leftovers. That's fine. And also, I love to order like big salads at restaurants because I hate making that. Like, that's not my favorite thing to make at home. And so, if
mm.
they're going to like chop all those ingredients for me, perfect. I will let someone else do that. But to that point, you have to remember why we go out. If it's to get your money's worth out of the food, then you're going to go to McDonald's and order off the dollar menu,
Mm,
right? But when you go to not even a nice restaurant, just some sort of sit down restaurant, even if it's an inexpensive one, and it's date night or you're out with your girlfriends or with your sister or whatever, you are actually not there to get your money's worth out of the food because restaurant food is not a good value. Let's be honest. You can make food for way cheaper.
mm,
So you have to think of what are all the reasons why you go out? Like the company. I
mm,
go out so that I don't have to cook and I don't have to do the dishes. That's like a
mm,
huge thing for me. We go out because it's just like a nice time for conversation. You tend to sit around more because you're waiting for the food to come out.
mm.
So you increase conversation with your children if you're, out with your family. So there's just so many other reasons. Like, can you think of any of other reasons why you go out?
Yeah, just to get out of the house.
Yeah.
I work
Yeah.
from home, going out for dinner is a nice break from being in the house. So, yeah, so many reasons, isn't there?
Yeah. And so when we only eat half of what they brought out for us, we didn't waste any money.
Mm,
Because and think about too, like the food cost at a restaurant is actually one of the least amount in their budget, basically. Like their
mm,
overhead includes more about their building and their people and the chefs, and but the ingredients themselves is actually pretty low on the budget.
mm,
And so we're really not paying for the food, we're paying for the experience. And so once you start eating past your physical enough, past that comfortable enough, what you're doing is actually decreasing the enjoyment of the overall experience.
mm.
Because when you walk out of a restaurant and you're like, oh my gosh, I ate too much. I feel yucky. My stomach is hurting. Need to unbutton my pants. And then what are you thinking about that evening? You're thinking, I did it again. I'll never lose weight. I'm never going to get this. I always do that. But all of those things, we're beating ourselves up instead of thinking, that was so great to catch up with that friend. We
Yeah.
had such a good time connecting. So we're decreasing the overall experience.
Mm. And thinking about it, you walk away from a meal like that if you've overeaten, thinking, "Oh, I wish I didn't have that last potato, whatever it was." But
Mhm.
if you left some food on your plate, you probably wouldn't walk away thinking, "Oh, I really wish I ate that last little bit." But yeah, I love reframing it as an experience rather than just going to eat as much as you can. It's entirely different. I'd love to jump back to what you were talking about in terms of when we tell kids that they need to clear their plate so that they can have dessert, because I'm
Mhm.
sure the parents listening are thinking, what is a good approach to this? If someone's got a child who isn't eating their dinner, but they know they're going to ask for dessert or yogurt or something as soon as they've finished, what would you do? What would you advise there?
It really is a tricky situation because I find that so many kids there's sensory issues and there's just so many reasons why kids don't eat what's on their plate. And I
Mm.
was such a strict parent back then. I was like, oh yeah, you don't have to eat what we're having for dinner. You're welcome to have cereal in the morning. And people would be like, oh, that's terrible. You would send them to bed hungry. And I'm like, no, they sent themselves to bed hungry, which, you can't, like, I was that strict. Like, if they did choose not to eat what I fixed for dinner, like, that was their choice. And
Mm.
I will say that my kids eat a very, very wide variety of foods, even when they were young, and they would notice and comment, like, it's so weird that our friends don't ever eat vegetables. So that is one way, is just to be like, this is what we're having for dinner. This is what we're having for dessert. And you can set guidelines around, we need to, you know, what I like to do now is just talk about the nutrition that we need in before we have some sugar. So we need to have a little bit of protein and a little bit of vegetable before we have a little bit of sugar. Otherwise, our
Mm.
tummies won't feel good.
Mm.
So that's how I like to do it now. I mean, my youngest is 16, so I'm just like, I don't know, do what you want. Um, but there is some wisdom and some studies that showed serving the dessert with the dinner. So, like putting a little cookie on the plate for them to just choose all around helps kids to realize that food is not a reward.
Mm.
And so there's lots of different ways you can try this, but I think the biggest thing is to not create the environment where dessert is the reward for having
Mm.
eaten broccoli, because then broccoli is bad and cookies are good.
Mm.
And so we want to kind of equalize all food. And so just thinking through the nutrition of it, it's okay to tell kids this food has protein and this food has vitamin C in it. It's not We're not counting their macros, right? We're
Yeah.
not telling them they have to have a certain number of grams of protein. But, this one makes our bones strong and this one helps us build muscle and this one just is for fun in our tummy, right? Like we can
Mm.
eat foods
Mhm.
for all kinds of reasons. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is to not vilify the broccoli by making it a requirement, but to try to just make it interesting. And you'll have to test it out, because I have to say I didn't do that. I did not serve the cookie with the dinner
Mm.
because, well, Instagram wasn't a thing when I was a
Yeah.
young mom. I didn't see that. I didn't know anyone that did it.
Yeah.
So it just, it wasn't something that we did. But I think also the biggest thing with kids is just to not assume that they need kid food. I remember even when mine were very young, I was serving them canned green beans. because they're very, very soft. And so it was
Mm,
like one of my kids' first like finger foods. And my brother, who already had several kids, was like, "You're giving him green beans for lunch?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So like just serve vegetables in interesting and different ways. And
mm,
I mean, we're talking like a baby. He was like learning to grasp on these like soft green beans. So of course, like we switched to fresh green beans when they're older and have more
mm.
teeth. But just never shy away from serving vegetables just because you think kids don't like them.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's like a government campaign over in the UK which is all about getting kids to eat more veg. And it's the tagline is eat them to defeat them, as if like vegetables are monsters and eating them kind of like
Mm.
gets rid of them. And it just vilifies vegetables. And I just think it's the worst campaign ever. I hate it. But yeah, I love your approach to food and getting kids to eat veg makes so much sense. So, one of the things that you also talk about is using your higher brain to make food choices. So, what does that mean and what does that involve?
So, in a really simplistic way, your brain it kind of is made up of two parts where you have your higher, more human thinking brain and then your lower automatic habit brain.
Mm,
So, your brain wants to be efficient. It actually requires a lot of energy, a lot of calories actually go towards your brain, towards your thinking. It's kind of insane actually. So, it your brain is like, we need to be more efficient all the time. So anything that it can delegate down to the lower brain out of habit, it will do that. So if you think about when you brushed your teeth this morning, were you doing like six other things? Were you thinking about other things? You weren't concentrating on which tooth you were brushing because you've delegated that down to the habit brain. You already know how to do that. So the problem is we've done this a lot with eating. And this is back to like the clearing your plate is we have delegated down to the lower brain that when we put food on the plate, we just eat it all without having to really think through it.
mm,
So we want to bring our eating up into our higher human brain and really into our conscious awareness. So there's a couple of things we can do at the meal time. Number one, no distractions. So if you are on your own, you want to put away your phone, put away, not be eating in front of the TV, especially when you're first trying to make an effort with this. I mean, I want your bum in a chair. I'd love it if you had a placemat and a napkin, like really sit down and have a meal because that says, hey, we are eating now. Like
mm,
make it an event and that way it brings it out of the habit. A lot of times I have clients that habitually clean up their kids plates. They just eat while they're standing or they snack while they are serving the food, fixing lunch for their kids. They're just eating standing at the counter. We want to avoid that. So if you just think, okay, I'm only going to eat when my bum is in a chair, that can really do wonders for bringing the eating into your conscious awareness. This also would eliminate car eating. Every time you go to the car that you need a snack. I used to be like that, but that's I, I guess your bum is in some sort of chair, but not at a table. So that's number one when you're actually eating. And then if you want to take it a step further, your higher brain is the part that can do the planning. Your lower brain cannot think ahead. So it can't decide what to eat for lunch when it's 8 a.m. Only your higher human brain can do that. And so if you think, I want to make all of my food decisions with my very best brain, that means we're going to be planning ahead what we're going to do. And all this is like in the morning, just jot down, here's what I'm going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If I need a snack, here's what I'll have. And then you've used your higher brain because that's the only part that can plan ahead and can
mm,
think into the future and make decisions based on what your future self really truly wants.
mm,
And so sometimes I get a lot of pushback. Well, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what, we're on vacation or we're going out to dinner. Sometimes we want to just write down, I'm going to start eating when I'm hungry and stop eating when I've had enough, just to remind yourself that that's always your guideline. And that will also remind you to bring eating up into your higher brain.
Mm.
But another way you can start on this really like ease in is you can just do one meal a day. In the evening, say, this is what I'm going to have for breakfast in the morning. And then eat just that because inevitably your lower brain will be like, that doesn't sound good. Let's just have something else. And try to eat exactly what you've planned because this builds a lot of trust with yourself. You're the very
Mm.
first person you're always going to cancel on because you don't cancel on other people nearly as much as you cancel on yourself when you have plans and then you're like, oh, I'm going to do this other thing, or oh, I'm just going to sleep in, or for whatever reason you decide not to do it. If you plan a sandwich and you eat a sandwich, your brain is like, oh, that's interesting. And
Mm.
it's going to take note over time. You will build a lot of trust with yourself. And so this is how we actually change up our eating. Because if you've planned a sandwich and chips every single day for 2 weeks, and you eat a sandwich and chips every single day for 2 weeks, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to go for an up level. I'm going to plan a sandwich and carrots. Your brain is less likely to fight you in that moment
Mm.
because you do what you say you're going to do. Because
Mm.
your brain is like, well, we eat what's on the plan. And so if the plan says carrots, that's what we're eating. And so building that trust and using that higher brain, using that best brain to make your food decisions will in the long run help you up level where you want. And
Mm.
just, I mean, literally that small of a tweak, like just a tiny little bit, and then go from there.
Yeah, so interesting. Such an interesting approach. And, it makes perfect sense that you've got to build that trust in yourself. I can think of many times when I've planned to do something and haven't followed through with it. And it almost becomes like a habit to ignore the plan. And I think it probably stems from trying to plan too much and kind of like run before I can walk. And I think going back to what you were saying about like making sure your bum's in a seat and that's when you eat. Well, it rhymes.
Yeah.
New catchphrase. But I was just thinking about how a lot of what we do is just associations. Like some people they walk through the front door and they go straight to the fridge, or they come
Mhm.
down to cook dinner and they crack open a bottle of wine or whatever drink. For some people, it's they refuel their car and they go into the petrol station and they pick up a chocolate bar, whatever.
Mhm.
And these things can just be almost unconscious, they're just habitual. So we've got to start breaking those associations, which I think can be sometimes the most challenging thing, that the things that we do almost unconsciously. How do we start to break these things that we do without even thinking about it?
Yeah, the habit eating and the mindless eating is a really like it's a subset of emotional eating. And so it is a tricky one because you basically have physical hunger and emotional hunger. Physical hunger is the one that comes from your body and says, we need food now. And emotional hunger is all the other kinds. It's all the other reasons that we eat. And that includes the habit and the mindless eating. So having a plan and having it front and center for yourself. So if you are going to get a chocolate bar, like it needs to be on the plan ahead of time. So just starting to create that plan every single day and then not just write it and leave it in your office, but have it in a place where it's visible to you. So some of my clients, they'll write it down and then take a picture. So it's always on their phone.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, honestly, it's such a silly thing, but post-it notes in the kitchen just to remind you this is what we're having. You can even, because you can write your plan, like your breakfast, lunch, and dinner on post-its and just put them in the kitchen on the pantry. So then when you go to the pantry to grab something, you're like, is it one of these things?
Mm.
Is it time? Am I hungry for lunch? If I'm
Yeah.
hungry for lunch, great. Grab the post-it note. Let's make it. If I'm
Mm.
not hungry for lunch, what am I doing here? Am I bored? Am I anxious? Am I, yeah, right? Like ask yourself, what am I doing here if it's not physical hunger that's driven me here into the kitchen? So that's just a couple of like practical ideas. But on the emotional level, learning to check in with your emotions 5 or 6 times a day and having a lot of emotional granularity, meaning you want to really specifically say what you're feeling. So not good and bad, but I'm feeling joy or peace. I'm feeling anxious, frustrated, determined, curious, like really specific emotions has actually been shown to, like, checking in 6 times a day has been shown to improve mental health. And
Mm.
so when we up level our general mental health and our general feelings about the day, we are better able to follow plans and to follow through with what we have planned. Breaking habits like going into the gas station, again, I would just honestly put notes for yourself, reminders, have a plan in the morning, have thoughts that you are practicing, just like you have practice or a plan for your eating. You can have a plan for your thinking.
Mm.
What am I going to be thinking today? I'm going to be thinking today I'm worth it. Today, another one I have a client that's really using a lot is let's just get this done. She's been losing the same 30 pounds for like 8 years, like making not up and down, but like trying to lose the same.
Right.
And so she's like, I'm really tired of trying to do this. Like, let's just get this done. And
Mm.
so that really helps her when her brain is like, ooh, but let's get a candy bar. Because she's been practicing this thought, let's just get this done.
Mm.
She's like, no, we're just going to get this done. I'm going to skip that candy bar today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like taking the decision making out of it and saying,
Mm-hmm.
not having that battle internally and saying, let's just do it. Yeah.
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 This is a little bit of a side note, but I notice a lot of some of the examples you gave were transitions. So if you notice that you frequently eat on a transition, so this is coming from work to home, especially if you're a parent, you're going from a working person to a parent person. That's a transition for the brain. Even if you are working at home and you get up from your desk and you're like, I'm done for the day, and then you go downstairs. And so you're going from working to not working. Or if you are going from home and you're going to get in the car. Anytime we have these transitions of specifically of roles. So I'm going from mom to work or spouse to friends. Anytime we notice that, your brain gets slightly uncomfortable. And this is often when we want a snack.
Mm.
We want to take the edge off of these transitions because we're just slightly uncomfortable. And it's not so much that you're like anxiety or fidgety or anything, but it's just a transition. And
Mm.
so watch for those if you notice well, I always get gas on my way to work. And so it's actually a transition time. That's why I need a snack.
Mm.
Or if you notice every time when you come in, because what happens is a lot of times we come in at the end of the day, and surely we are physically hungry. It is time to start on dinner.
Mm.
But then on Saturday, we're running errands and we come home at 3 in the afternoon. It's not dinner time, but we're like, well, I always get a snack when I come home.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so just watch for those transitions and just notice, am I eating because I'm physically hungry, or am I eating because I got home, or because
Mm.
I'm getting in the car, or because I went downstairs?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never thought about those transitions before, but as you're saying it, I was thinking that I can see myself doing it. I can think about times when I do that as well, and I never really understood why, but you've sort of connected the pieces for me there, so that it makes so much sense. And I feel like I could talk to you all day about this stuff. It's so interesting, and you explain it so well. How can people, listen to more of what you do, find out more about what you do, and connect with you online?
Yeah. So I also have a podcast. It's called Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. And I talk about all of this kind of stuff. And my Instagram is well with Lisa there's underscores well underscore with underscore Lisa. And my website is wellwithlisa.com. So those are all the places. I have a free ebook about constructing your go-to meals. So for those times that you don't know what to eat, you have ideas of things that you know always work for you. So they're your go-to meal. So especially for those times that you haven't planned and you feel like the day is gonna be shot, you always have something that works well for you. So
Mm.
you can grab that as well.
That sounds great. Awesome. Well, we'll link all of that stuff in the show notes so it's easy for everyone to find. And we'll share bits on Instagram and tag you so people can find you easily on there as well. But thank you so much, Lisa. It's been so interesting. I've
Yeah.
absolutely loved having you on the show. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. Now, I've got something exciting to tell you about. Many of you may know that I regularly run a 5-day metabolism reset challenge, which is all about getting the foundations in place for optimizing your metabolism and hormones for lasting weight loss. The exciting news is that I've transformed this from a live challenge that's only available for a week every few months to something that you can do anytime. One of the pieces of feedback that I had from one of my most recent participants was that they listen to my podcast, they listen to other podcasts, and they've done a lot of reading on the subject, but they still learn so much from the challenge, which is so great to hear. So if you've been wanting to join me for the Metabolism Reset Challenge, but it's not been falling on the right week for you previously, now's your time to jump in. And you can find out more by searching louisedigbynutrition.com. Also, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast, or maybe a topic that you'd like me to cover, or maybe even a guest that you'd like me to get on, then you can leave me a voice note by searching speakpipe.com/Louise Digby. And if you're enjoying this podcast, then make sure you hit follow, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes, Apple Podcasts. And if you've got a spare moment, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a very quick review. Let me know how the podcast has helped you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.